Hello, I'm Richard Vobes, the Bald Explorer, and this is my Sunday chat. Do draw up, you are very welcome. It's been an interesting week this week. We may remember that Sunday's chat last week was on a Monday, but it's actually on the Sunday today, although I do realise that some people in different parts of the world, depending on when the time it gets published, they get to see it a different day, so it all is irrelevant really. But anyway, going back over this week, I went on a walk in search of, which is north of Horsham. Fascinating piece of earthwork, which apparently was originally constructed possibly in the Anglo-Saxon times. It may be the case, but it predated the Motte and Bailey Castle in Horsham. And I was following in the footsteps of Glenn Johnson, who's one of our regular viewers. He's also in our Facebook group. And he'd found it, posted some footage of it, and I thought, well, I ought to have a little walk around because I'd been to the Motte and Bailey Castle north of Horsham, just alongside the A264 there, and I wanted to have a look and see what it was like. And there is a path, clearly on old maps and also on the Ordnance Survey. Now, it didn't say that it was a council-run path, as on the Ordnance Survey it has green, usually on the most permissible paths. But usually if there is a path, unless there's a sign that says private, no entry, then it's perfectly fine to go down it because we have the right to roam. And certain parts of the land has open access, and this is a historic monument that I wanted to go and see. However, having made the video, it transpired that actually the route that I'd taken following this path had gone on 3 different people's private land. And the first person who got in touch with me said, I wasn't so upset, but maybe other people will be. And then I had an email from a lady whose land the actual castle was situated on. And when I say castle, for those that's not seen the video, it is purely just the earthworks. The castle would have been a timber construction back in the, well, it's debatable really, the 12th century possibly, somewhere around there anyway. So there's nothing really to see other than the fact that there is clearly a moat around the area. A moated manor house is what it would have been. And the lady got in touch with me and said, look, you've actually trespassed on our property. You shouldn't be able to go up there. I'm quite surprised that you did that. Can you take the video down? Whereupon I replied to her and I said ever so politely, I said, look, I didn't mean to trespass on, but there were no signs. There was this clearly marked out path. It's on the maps. There was no fences I crossed. And, if you don't want people on your land and there's a path, then you need to just put a sign up, a simple sign. It's not going to cost very much. And of course, I would naturally respect that. Well, another listener got in touch with me and said, well, actually, up until 20 years ago, you could walk down that path quite happily. Nobody cared. But in recent times, 20 years ago, it was then sort of closed off. But when I went, it wasn't. So I'm interested to know what you guys think about a situation where there's no sign. You go in to see a historic monument. You're not leaving any litter. You're not wandering off the path. You're not doing anything else. You're seeing it and then you go. And then the owner comes back to you and says, by the way, that's on private property. You shouldn't be there. But because it's an important monument and you're recording this thing for the sake of prosperity, what do you think? Should that video be removed? Be interested in your thoughts on that. Then I was doing some more reading from Willow Farm book. Now, I know that's not everybody's cup of tea, but thanks to those people who've been in touch and said, yeah, we've really enjoyed that. I'm so pleased. I did think that actually I might try reading that outside in the landscape, which might be a bit more relevant, particularly as it's talking about the old farming skills of 100 years ago. If you like that idea, do let me know in the comments. I think being outside would be great, although the whole point of reading the book was really to give me something to do when the weather was so miserable and I couldn't get outside. So, it's a bit of a two-edged thing. I met up with Darren Dendy in the week. He's a lovely chap, and he was telling me about the Terrapins, and he was calling them the giant Terrapins, but actually I believe that Terrapins just will grow to the size of dinner plates if they're in a large pond anyway. And he was telling me the story about how they got into that pond, a video that if you haven't seen it's worth checking out. But more interestingly was when Darren was then telling me about his family tree and the Dendys. He was telling me there was a huge number of Dendys in the Itchingfield churchyard buried that can date back. I think the earliest one was in the 17th century, 1600 and something. But he says that Dendy is an Anglo-Saxon name, so he suspects that his lineage, his ancestry, goes back a long way. Well, I've spoken to him and he's very keen to do a separate video where we go and have a look at some of the graveyards and find out more about his lineage, because I think there's a huge interest in people looking at their ancestry. So that will be a good one. The lovely Julia and I got out onto the A24. We're doing a mini series over the next few months, looking at some of the villages that are stringed along the A24, which is a road from Worthing in Sussex up to London. It stops around at Clapham, I think, but we won't be doing the Surrey and the London bit. It's really just the bit in West Sussex because they're easily more accessible. And I'm interested in those villages that have been bypassed. So there's Washington and Dial Post, Ashington and Southwater. They've all been bypassed by the A24, which has obviously kept the communities together. But of course, a lot of trade would have originally come by that route going through the Sussex landscape. But of course, Sussex was notorious for its clay and its very arduous travelling conditions. So we want to have a look at those. That will be carrying on. Coming up tomorrow, very excited because I've managed to get out onto the South Downs. We've actually had some sunshine, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, sunshine. And I was up there by the Jack and Jill windmills, and I wanted to do a bit of the South Downs way. Now, over the, again, a few months or so, I want to chart more of the South Downs way in bite-sized chunks. And I've just picked this one at random because it's a very simple little route. I've made a video about the Jack and Jill windmills, particularly the Jill windmill. The Jack one is actually on private land and it's owned. It's a residence, so you can't really get in there. And I don't think they open their doors or anything. It's just very private. But the Jill is a beautifully restored post mill. And it is open now and you can go and have a look around, and I recommend it. It's really nice, and the people who run it are incredibly friendly, so well worth having a look at that. And I walk up to Ditchling Beacon in this video, looking at the landscape and so on and so forth. So that's coming up. And then on the way back, I also wanted to have a look at the north escarpment of the South Downs. We often see the South Downs, if you're in the Sussex Weald and you look south, as this misty silhouetted ridge, and you don't really see too much of it because the sun, of course, is in the south, and so hence it's silhouetted. But it's beautiful coombes, C-O-O-M-B-E-S, coombes, which are these sort of long fingers, if you like, that stretch down from a period when the whole of Sussex was covered in chalk in a giant dome up as far as the North Downs, and then over time this all weathered and disappeared, leaving the rim basically of this great big dome, which is the North and then the South Downs. And as the water, the wind and the elements eroded this and took away the top soils, leaving really basically the chalk, you ended up with these fascinating undulating hills and then this wonderful escarpment. So I go and investigate a little bit of that and maybe found something that perhaps is old, perhaps not, but that will be out on Tuesday, I think, this week coming up. Oh, and to end today's video, friend of the Bald Explorer is, of course, Richard Succot. We've been out making videos in the past, and I'm sure he'll be joining me for some more explorations coming up. He runs the Veg Grower podcast, which is an audio podcast, but he also does YouTube videos about his allotment and about growing vegetable and being self-sufficient and that sort of thing. And it's very good. And as you can see, I'm in my studio here, which I mainly use for now the chat, but also my sister station on YouTube, the Vobes show, which is a sort of comedy chat thing. But he's been inspired to create a set for his podcast and his videos, and I thought I'd go and have a quick look. So let's have a quick look at the time when I went to visit him, just as he'd got it organised. Just popped over to see Richard Succot in his potting shed. Hello, Richard.
Podding shed, not potting.
Oh, podding shed, because Richard runs the Veg Grower podcast, where he has his podding shed. And this is down... so where is this? Is this on your allotment or in your back garden? Because it was dark when I arrived, I couldn't see.
It's in neither of those places.
No?
No.
Where is it then?
It's in my spare room, my spare bedroom.
What, you've got a podding shed in your spare bedroom?
Yeah.
Well, that's ridiculous. Richard, as you may know, is, of course, a fellow podcaster. I nearly said broadcaster then, but that's technically not correct, although we cast broadly to whoever wants to listen. And he does his Veg Grower podcast. He's a friend of the Bald Explorer and also the Vobes show, and you may have seen him come up in the comments. So, yeah. Richard, what's the idea behind this? Because I thought I'd be getting cold in your podding shed, but actually it's quite warm.
Well, the whole thing is, it's actually been talking to you, and I, as you know, I do the podcast.
You do?
I also started doing live shows, and I also do videos.
Yes.
But my complaint with a lot of the shows after talking to you is that they lose the garden feel to them. Now, what I mean by that, if you listen to a gardening radio show, then you know they're on the radio. They're in the studio.
Yes.
Whereas gardening should be about being out in the garden.
But you haven't got all this around you just for audio, surely?
No, it's also for the video, for live shows.
Yes, because you do. Oh, yeah, you do a live show and you do a YouTube show.
Yes, yes, and it's for that mainly, but also there might be the adverts and things that I run in order to.
So I was just looking at that bloke with the lawnmower. But yeah, so this is actually an illusion, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
This is an illusion because we're not really in a shed at all.
Not at all.
So that's going to be really exciting for Richard, and I recommend people to tune into the Veg Grower podcast and see what his video's up, especially if you're interested in gardening. Well, that's about it for this week. I shall be out and about doing more explorations, etc., walks in the Sussex. I want particularly this year to look at the Englishness of this country and really promote being in England. Because Britain is now separating from the EU, we need to big ourselves up a bit and be proud, be a proud nation of what we do. And I'm English, I'm proud to be English, and we've got a fantastic history and traditions to explore, and I'll be doing more of that this year. Anyway, until next week's chat, I will leave you, but of course there'll be plenty of other videos where I'm out doing my explorations. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to follow, like and subscribe, become a patron, support what I do. Every little bit of money helps put petrol in the car and enables me to go further afield. There'll be more further trips of things away when we get into better weather. But in the meantime, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you when I'm out and about. Till then, bye-bye. Bye-bye.